Welcome to Measurement and Appraisal. In this class, we will be discussing various aspects of psychological measurement. First of all, I would like for you to consider whether testing is important at all. As a graduate student, you have probably become very tired of all the tests you have taken up to now. You might think it would be best to just stop testing altogether. However, that's not really possible. We need tests to help us make more objective decisions in our everyday life. Think about all the different kinds of tests you've taken and that you know about. I invite you to pause this for a few seconds and write down some of the tests that come to mind. Not only school tests, think about medical tests, blood tests, cancer detection tests, pregnancy tests, not to forget blood pressure or heart rate tests, and then all the kinds of tests that we use in careers, licensing tests, skills tests for pilots or truck drivers, board examinations, and then tests to get into school in the first place, GED, SAT, ACT, GRE, the LSAT, the MCAT, even the ASVAB or ASVAB to get into the military. And then we have performance tests for dance, for musical chairs if you're in band or orchestra, gymnastics performance tests to get selected for the Olympics team. Even your driving test is a performance test. Now let's think about psychological tests, which are the main subject of this class. Intelligence tests, neuropsych tests to diagnose and help people with brain injuries or diseases, achievement tests that are important to help us determine how people are likely to perform in school or in their lives so that we can help them developing coping strategies or getting special classes or training. Other tests include personality tests, including depression or anxiety measures, behavioral measures to measure ADHD or other behaviors typical of mental disorders, psychopathology diagnostic tests like the Rorschach, the MMPI, the TAT, and don't forget career interest tests, opinion surveys, and the like. The clinical interview itself is a kind of test or examination. Even though we may dislike and dread classroom tests and final exams, we need tests to help us make decisions and diagnose and many other reasons. So getting rid of tests is probably out of the question. If we're going to have tests, we want to make sure they're measuring what they're supposed to measure, and they're measuring it accurately and fairly for everyone. I'm sure you've heard about the controversy surrounding intelligence testing in the past, and whether intelligence tests were fair to all genders, ethnic groups, and socioeconomic groups from both rural and urban areas. This is an important and ongoing issue in measurement. Later in this class, we'll talk about reliability and validity of tests, and the importance of making sure that the tests and measures we use are reliable and valid, and appropriate for the purpose we're using them for. There are lots of different ways to categorize tests and measures. Some are done with paper and pencil, like a classroom test, and others require performance, like dance or musical or athletic ability. Some are timed to see how quickly a person can finish. Others are more interested in measuring the depth of a person's knowledge and usually have longer time limits. Some tests are given individually. Some can be given to a group. Some tests look to see how a person performs when they're giving their maximum effort. Think of a stress test at the doctor's office. And others are more interested in what a person's day-to-day performance is. In psychological testing, we're often very interested in how a person performs in comparison to other people on the same task. That requires a norm-referenced test interpretation, so we can compare them to the norm or the average. Other times, we just want to see if the person has learned enough of the material to meet some standard for licensing or to pass a class. Those are criterion-referenced test interpretations. When we do psychological testing, we make important assumptions. We assume that people are different. Some people have more of some trait, some have less, and knowing these differences is important. We also assume that we can figure out how to measure these traits, and that the traits are not going to change much from day to day or situation to situation. And finally, we assume that these inner traits are reflective of a real difference in the person's behavior. Not all psychological science agrees with these assumptions. Some people would say that people are much more influenced by their environment than we would like to believe, and their traits are somewhat variable and changing. An example is that even honest people lie sometimes. Even shy people can do wonderful presentations. In fact, most of us believe that people can change over time. Otherwise, why would we be interested in counseling at all? So does that mean that it's useless to measure how a person is performing today? Not at all. Knowing where a person is today can help us and them figure out how to get where they want to be. Finally, let me give you a good definition of what a psychological test is. It is a standardized process or device that yields information about a sample of behavior or cognitive processes in a quantified manner. Depending on the context, standardized sometimes means that we have uniform procedures for administering and scoring the test. Sometimes it means that the test has norms or standards to compare to, and sometimes it means that the test is administered to a group. Usually, we're just referring to giving the test fairly, so that we give it the same way to everybody and score it the same way for everybody. This is what makes testing useful. If we don't do it the same for everybody, then we can't trust the results. So what's the use in giving a test at all?